Look, I need to say something before I start, and I need you to actually hear it. I'm not telling you these because I want to. I'm telling you because last Tuesday I was in the Kroger parking lot and I saw a bus, a 9X, the Crosstown Express, pull up to the stop on Veterans, and I sat in my car and watched it idle for 40 seconds. And when it pulled away, I realized I'd been holding the steering wheel with both hands at 10 and 2 like I was driving it. My knuckles were white. I don't know how long I'd been doing that, and I thought, okay, Ray, you done pretending these are just work stories. You need to say them out loud to someone who'll tell you if they're normal. So, that's why I called. You said you had time. You said you wanted to hear them, so here they are. But I'm genuinely asking, when I'm done, you tell me. You tell me if these are just things that happen to people who drive buses for 23 years, or something is wrong with me. Because I can't tell anymore. I really can't. I wrote them down. I've got a list. 10 of them. I put them in order. Not the order they happen, but the order they make sense in. At least to me. Whether that order holds up when I say them out loud, I don't know. We'll find out together. Story 1. The woman rode past her stop. Okay, first one. This was early, maybe 2004, 2005. I was still on the 38 route, the one that runs from downtown out through Millvale and up to the hospital district. Night shift. I was doing the 10:15 p.m. departure, which meant I'd loop out and back and be done by midnight. The 38 at night was usually dead. Maybe 6-7 riders total for the whole run. Most of them got on downtown and got off before Millvale. By the time I hit the hospital stretch, it was just me and the bus, and the overhead lights buzzing the way they do when half the fluorescents are dying. This woman got on at 4th and Grant. I remember because she used exact change coins, not a pass, and she counted them out slowly, one at a time, into the fare box. She wasn't old, maybe 30s. Normal clothes. Had a purse and a plastic grocery bag from Rite Aid. She sat down about 4 rows back on the right side, which is the side facing away from traffic, and she put the bag on the seat next to her. And that was it. That was the whole interaction. She was a passenger. I drove. Except she didn't get off. I did the full outbound run. Every stop, I checked the mirror. She was sitting in the same position, hands in her lap, looking straight ahead, not at her phone. I don't think she had one out, not at the window, just forward. At the back of my head, basically, or at the fare sign above the windshield. We got to the hospital loop, which is the terminus. Everybody else was already off. I pulled into the turnaround, opened the doors, and said what I always said, "End of the line, folks." Even though it was just her, she didn't move. Now, this happens. People fall asleep. People zone out. I've had guys ride the whole loop twice because they were drunk and unconscious. So I put the bus in park, I stood up, and I walked back to her row. "Ma'am, this is the last stop. We're at the hospital turnaround." She looked at me. And here's the thing. She wasn't asleep. She wasn't confused. Her eyes were clear. She looked at me the way you'd look at someone who'd said something obvious, like I told her the sky was blue. "I know," she said. "Okay. Well, I've got to head back downtown. You're welcome to ride back if you want, but you'll need to pay again." She opened her purse. She had more coins. She started counting them out into her palm. Exact change. Same amount. She'd already had it ready. So she rode back, the whole route, all the way downtown, didn't get off. I pulled into the transit center, and again I did the end of the line announcement. She stood up this time. She picked up her Rite Aid bag. She walked to the front, dropped the coins in the fare box. I had to unlock it because we'd already zeroed out, and then she looked at me. "Thank you," she said, and she got off. And I sat there and I thought, okay, that was weird, but I've seen weirder. She wanted to ride the bus. People do that. Lonely people, or people whose apartments are cold, or people who are afraid of someone waiting for them at home. The bus is warm and lit and moving and somebody's awake at the front. I get it. I've always gotten it. But here's why this is on the list. 3 weeks later, same route, same 10:15 departure, she got on again. 4th and Grant. Exact change. Rite Aid bag. 4 rows back, right side, same seat. And I thought, okay, she liked the ride, she's back. She rode the full loop again, hospital turnaround, paid again, rode back downtown, got off, said thank you. This happened every Tuesday for 7 months. Every single Tuesday. I started keeping track. I didn't write it down at first. I just noticed. Then I started making a mark on my route sheet. A little dot in the margin next to 4th and Grant, outbound. Every Tuesday, a dot. She never spoke to me beyond thank you. She never varied her seat. She never brought anything different. Always the same purse, always the Rite Aid bag. I couldn't tell if it was the same bag or new ones. They all looked the same. Around month 4, I started watching the bag in the mirror. Not staring, just glancing, because I'd started to wonder what was in it. You ride a bus twice every Tuesday night for 4 months, carrying a bag, you start to develop a relationship with the bag. And I noticed, this is subtle, and I might be wrong, that the bag was never the same fullness. Some nights it was rounded out like there was a box in it. Some nights it was almost flat. Some nights it had weight pulling at the handles. I didn't ask. Drivers don't ask. That's not an official policy, that's a survival rule. You don't ask passengers about their lives because you'll never stop hearing about them. You've got 8 hours of sitting in a chair with no escape. You learn to not open doors. Month 6, a Tuesday. She got on, and this time something was different. She was wearing the same kind of clothes, carrying the same bag, but she was... I don't know how to describe this without sounding like I'm making it up. She was lighter, not thinner. Lighter, like the effort of being a person sitting in a chair had decreased. She moved more easily. She sat down faster. She didn't arrange herself the way she usually did, the fussy little adjustments. She just sat. She looked at the window. First time in 6 months I'd seen her look at anything except straight ahead. I drove the route. Hospital turnaround. She didn't pay the second fare. She stood up, walked to the front, and she stopped next to me. Not in front of the door. Next to me, by the driver's partition. She said, "I'm done now. I won't be coming back." I said, "Okay." "You take care." She said, "You too." And then, and this is the part, this is why, it's on the list. She said, "You should check the bag I left." She got off. The doors closed. She walked across the parking lot toward the hospital entrance, and I watched her until she went through the automatic doors and the light swallowed her. I went back to her seat. The Rite Aid bag was on the seat next to where she'd been sitting, same as always. It was light, almost empty. Inside there was a stack of receipts, maybe 30 of them, all from Rite Aid. They were for the same thing, the same single item, purchased once a week, 1 pack of replacement razor blades. The refill kind for a safety razor, 30 receipts, 30 packs of blades, 7 months. But there were no blades in the bag. I stood in the aisle of my bus holding that bag, and I thought about a woman who bought razor blades every week for 7 months and came to the bus with them and left the bus without them. I thought about where those blades went during the ride. I thought about how the bag was different shapes on different nights. I thought about her getting lighter. I thought about her walking into the hospital. I threw the bag away. I finished my shift. I never saw her again. And here's what stays with me. Here's the residue. I don't know what she was doing. I have theories, and every single one of them is a story about someone in pain. And in most of those stories, the bus ride was the only thing between the buying and the using. The bus was a delay. I was a delay. The 45 minutes out and 45 minutes back was the gap she put between the impulse and the act. And she did it 30 times. And on the last time she left the receipts for me like a record. Like proof that the delay had worked long enough for her to get herself to the hospital. That's the best version of the story. That's the version where I helped. But I don't know that's what happened. I don't know what was in those bags on the nights they were full. I don't know why she needed the ride to be exactly the same every time, the same seat, the same route, the same silence. I don't know what the bus was for her. And the thing that actually scares me, the reason this one goes first, is that I never asked. I had 30 chances and I never once said, "Are you okay?" Because drivers don't ask. And that rule kept me safe and comfortable for 23 years. And it also means that every person who ever sat in my bus carrying something terrible was carrying it alone. And I was right there, 8 feet away, and I chose the quiet. That's not a ghost story. I know. But you asked me what scared me, and what scares me is the math. How many people I was in a room with, because a bus is a room, who needed someone to say 4 words, and the someone was me, and I didn't. That's the first one. It gets different from here. Story 2. The route that gained a stop. This one's logistical. I know that sounds boring, but stay with me. Every bus route has a fixed number of stops. They're published. They're on maps. They're programmed into the automated announcement system, that voice that says next stop Elm Street or whatever. When they add or remove a stop, it goes through the transit authority, there's a public comment period, the signs get moved, the system gets updated. It's bureaucratic and slow, and it leaves a paper trail a mile wide. In 2011, I transferred to the 16 route. The 16 ran from the south end of the city through the University District and out to the eastern suburbs. 47 stops outbound, 47 stops inbound. I know this because I memorized them. I always memorize my routes, not because I had to, but because knowing where you are by feel, by rhythm, without looking at the stop list, makes you a better driver. You anticipate. You know the turn is coming before you see it. Your body learns the route and your mind gets freed up to watch the road and the mirrors and the passengers. So, 47 stops outbound. Except one morning in March, about 3 months into the route, I counted 48. I didn't notice it the way you'd notice something dramatic. There was no moment of shock. I was doing the 6:20 a.m. outbound, the first run of the day, and I was in the stretch between the university and the suburbs, the long, straight section on Clearfield Avenue where the stops are spread far apart because it's mostly warehouses and light industrial. And my body told me something was off. The rhythm was wrong. There was an extra beat. I'd passed a stop I didn't recognize. Or no, that's not quite right. I'd stopped at a stop I didn't recognize. Someone had pulled the cord. I pulled over. The doors had opened. Someone had gotten off. And it was only after the doors closed and I pulled away that I thought, wait, that's not a stop. But there was a sign. I'd seen it in the mirror. A regular transit sign, the same green and white rectangle as every other stop, with the route number and the stop name. I couldn't remember the stop name. I finished the run. When I got to the turnaround, I pulled out my route sheet. 47 stops. I counted my actual stops against the sheet. I was one over, but I couldn't identify which one was extra because, and this is what got me, I couldn't clearly remember the extra stop as distinct from the ones around it. It was in the Clearfield Avenue stretch, I was pretty sure. But when I tried to place it, it felt like trying to remember a specific step while walking downstairs. You know there was one. You can't isolate it. I told myself I'd miscounted. I did the inbound run, 47 stops. Fine. Normal. The next morning, 6:20 outbound. I counted carefully this time. I was deliberate about it. I had a pencil in my route sheet and I made a mark at every stop, 47 stops. I felt stupid. I'd miscounted. Fine. Brains do that at 6 a.m. But the next day, Thursday, I hit 48 again. Someone pulled the cord. I stopped. The doors opened. I checked the mirror. A man got off. Middle-aged, work clothes, a lunch pail, a regular-looking guy heading to one of the warehouse jobs. He stepped off the bus and walked toward a building that looked like every other building on Clearfield. And behind the bus I saw the sign. Green and white. Route number. Stop name. I couldn't read because I was already pulling away. I marked my sheet. 48. I started to keep a specific tally. For the next 2 weeks I counted every run. Here's the pattern. Monday 47. Tuesday 47. Wednesday 48. Thursday 48. Friday 47. Monday 47. Tuesday 48. Wednesday 48. Thursday 47. Friday 48. There was no pattern. Or if there was, I couldn't find it. The 48th stop appeared on some days and not others. It was always on the outbound run. It was always in the Clearfield stretch. And I could never, afterward, remember it clearly. I did the obvious thing. I drove the Clearfield stretch in my personal car on a Saturday, slowly, looking at every stop sign. I counted them. 7 stops on Clearfield Avenue outbound. That matched my route sheet. There was no extra sign, no extra pull-off, no extra anything. But on Monday morning, there it was again. 48. Someone pulled the cord. I stopped. The doors opened. Someone got off. Here's what started to bother me beyond the count. It was never the same person. The Wednesday and Thursday riders were different people. Different ages, different clothes. But they all did the same thing. They got off. They walked toward the buildings and this is going to sound like I'm editorializing, and I promise I'm not. They belonged there. They walked like people who knew where they were going. They didn't hesitate. They didn't look around. They stepped off the bus and they had a destination and they walked to it. In April, I brought it up to another driver, Gary Puckett. Gary had driven the 16 before me. 8 years on that route. I said, hey, ever count an extra stop on Clearfield? He got this look. Not scared, not confused. The look you get when someone asks you about something you decided a long time ago to stop thinking about. Don't count the stops, Ray, he said. What do you mean? I mean, don't count them. Drive the route. Stop when someone pulls the cord. Don't count. But theirs, I know. Don't count. And that was it. He wouldn't say anything else about it. He changed the subject to the union negotiation, and when I tried to bring it back, he physically stood up and walked to the vending machine. Conversation over. So I did what Gary said. I stopped counting, and that fixed it, in a way. If you don't count, there's no extra stop. There's just a route, and the stops, and the people who get on and off. The route does what it does, and you drive it, but I couldn't completely let go. I stopped counting daily, but once a month I'd count, just to check, and the number was never 47. Once I started checking monthly, it was never 47 again. It was 48, every time, every single monthly count. In 2013, the Transit Authority updated the route, new stops added out in the suburbs because of a housing development. The official count went from 47 to 51, I counted, 52. It had kept its margin. When the digital announcement system got updated, it didn't announce the extra stop. The automated voice would skip it. You'd hear next stop, Clearfield and Industrial, and then next stop, Clearfield and Marsh, and between those two, the bus would stop, and someone would get off, and the voice would say nothing. Nobody else pulled the cord at that stop. Only people who were already on the bus and somehow knew it existed. I never saw anyone waiting at that stop on the curb. I need to say this next part carefully because it sounds like more than it is, and I don't want to make it into something it's not. In 2016, I was doing the 1620 outbound. We hit the extra stop. Someone pulled the cord. I stopped. The doors opened. And this time, nobody got off. I waited. I checked the mirror. Every seat I could see was occupied by someone who was not moving toward the door. I waited the standard 12 seconds. That's how long we hold at a stop, and then I closed the doors. As the doors closed, I heard the fare box chime. The sound it makes when someone feeds it coins. A single fare. But the fare box was behind me, and the doors were closing, and nobody had gotten on. I could see the fare box in my peripheral mirror. There was nobody standing at it. The coin counter on the fare box had incremented by 1 fare. I checked at the end of my run. My total fares were 1 over the number of passengers I'd logged. 1 extra fare, paid in exact change, at a stop that doesn't exist, by a person who either got on or didn't. That happened 3 more times between 2016 and when I left the route in 2019. Always the same. Pull the cord, stop. Nobody visible gets off. Doors close. Fare box chimes. Extra fare. No extra passenger I could see. I don't have an explanation. I'm not offering one. But I'll tell you what I think about, which is the people who did get off at that stop in the early days. The ones with work clothes and lunch pails who walked toward the buildings like they knew where they were going. I think about where they went. And I think about the fact that on Saturdays when I drove Clearfield in my own car, those buildings had no doors on the sides facing the bus stop. I checked. I got out of my car and walked to the buildings. Flat walls, corrugated metal, no entrance, no window, no door. But people walked toward them every week and I never saw anyone walk back. Story 3, 2047 a.m. I should explain how overnight routes work, because this one doesn't make sense without that context. Most cities have a skeleton service that runs between about midnight and 5 a.m. Bare minimum. 1 bus every 45 minutes to an hour on major corridors. The riders at that hour are a specific population. Shift workers, people leaving bars, people with nowhere else to go, and people who are traveling between places that don't have names you'd say out loud. I did overnights from 2008 to 2012. 4 years. The route was the 71, which was a long crosstown that connected the hospital, the casino, the Greyhound station, and the VA. Draw a line between those 4 places and you've drawn the 71, and you've also drawn a map of American desperation at 2 in the morning. At night, the driver is not a driver. The driver is the last public employee awake. You are the only representative of the functioning world that some of these people will interact with all night. I've had people get on the bus and say thank you just for being there. Not thank you for the ride. Thank you for existing. Thank you for proving that the world is still running. So, 2047 a.m., the specific time matters. It kept coming up. I started noticing it the way you notice anything, by not noticing it and then suddenly realizing you've been not noticing it for a long time. I'd glance at the dashboard clock during a quiet stretch and it would be 2047. I'd look at my phone during a turnaround break and it would be 2047. I'd check the time because a traffic light seemed to be taking too long and it would be 2047. Now, I know what that sounds like. Confirmation bias. You notice a time once, it sticks, and then you notice it more because you're looking for it. I know that. I'm not an idiot. I drove a bus, I didn't fall off one. But here's what pushed it past confirmation bias for me. On 3 separate occasions between 2009 and 2011, a passenger boarded my bus, sat down, rode in silence, and at 2047 a.m. exactly, said something to me. Not to each other, not to someone on the phone, to me, facing forward, speaking toward the front of the bus, at the back of my head. 3 different people, 3 different nights, months apart. And each time, what they said didn't make sense in context, but made perfect sense later. First one, November 2009. A man in a denim jacket, maybe 50, sat near the back, quiet rider. At 2047, he said, clearly and calmly, you should call your mother before March. I didn't turn around. Drivers don't turn around. You use the mirror. I looked in the mirror. He was looking straight ahead, not at me, through me. Excuse me, I said. Nothing. He didn't repeat it. He didn't acknowledge he'd spoken. 3 stops later, he pulled the cord and got off. Normal exit. Didn't look at me. My mother had a stroke in February, late February. She survived, but she couldn't talk right afterward. I hadn't called her in weeks because you know how it is. Life. Shifts. Excuses. After the stroke, the doctor said the warning signs had probably been building for a month. If I'd called in January or early February, if I'd called before March, she might have mentioned the headaches, the blurred vision, the things she was too stubborn to go to the doctor for on her own. I might have pushed her. I might have made the appointment. I didn't call. She stroked. She recovered mostly. But I carry that one. Could be coincidence. One man says something cryptic on a bus at night, and you fit it to whatever happens next. I understand that argument. I even believe it. About 40%. Second one, June 2010. A young woman, maybe 25, hospital scrubs, got on at the VA, night shift worker heading home. She sat in the middle of the bus aisle seat. At 2047, she said, "The blue car in your lot isn't yours." I did turn around this time. She was texting. She didn't look up. "Did you say something?" I said. She glanced up. No, and went back to her phone. The next morning, I walked to the staff parking lot at the transit center and there was a blue Nissan Altima parked in my assigned spot. Not unusual. People park in the wrong spots all the time. I asked around. Nobody claimed it. It sat there for 3 days. On the 4th day, the police towed it. A week later, I heard from one of the maintenance guys that the car had been reported stolen from a town 40 miles away and had been used in a string of break-ins along the bus corridor. It had been parked in the transit lot in my spot as a stash point. Someone had been using my assigned parking spot to stage stolen property. If I hadn't known to look at it, if I hadn't walked out that morning specifically looking for a blue car, I wouldn't have reported it. It would have sat there for weeks. My parking spot is in the back corner. Nobody checks it. Third one, March 2011. An old man, very old. Shaking hands, cloudy eyes, the kind of old where you wonder how they got to the bus stop in the first place. He sat in the front, in the accessibility seats. At 2047, he said, "Don't take the overtime on the 14th. This one I tested." I wrote it down. March 14th was a Monday, about 2 weeks away. When the overtime list came around, I looked. There was a shift available. On the 14th, a double, covering for a guy who was on vacation. Good money. I almost took it. Almost. But I'd written down what the old man said, and I wanted to see what happened. I didn't take the shift. Marcus Webb took it instead. On March 14th, Marcus was driving the 3:15 p.m. outbound on Route 40 when a pickup truck ran a red light at the intersection of Broad and Vine and T-boned the bus at the front axle. Marcus broke his collarbone, 3 ribs, and his left wrist. 2 passengers went to the hospital. The truck driver was killed. If I'd taken that overtime, I'd have been driving that bus, that intersection, that time. And a man I'd never seen before told me not to at 2:37 a.m. 2 weeks earlier. I don't know what 247 means. I don't know if these people knew what they were saying. I don't know if they were speaking or if something was speaking through them, and I don't know if that distinction matters. What I know is that at 2047 a.m. on a city bus, something has access to information it shouldn't have, and it uses the passengers as a telephone, and the passengers don't remember ringing. I started watching for it. After Marcus's accident, I started watching hard. I'd stare at the clock from 2:40 onward, checking the mirror, waiting. Nothing. For the rest of 2011, nothing. For all 2012, nothing. Nobody said anything to me at 2047 a.m. ever again. And this is the part that made me leave the overnight shift. I started saying things. In September 2012, I was doing the 71, quiet night. 2 passengers, both asleep. I was on Westfall Avenue, the long, straight run between the casino and the Greyhound station, and I felt something in my chest, like a hiccup, but deeper, like a word was forming in a part of my body that doesn't make words. And I opened my mouth and I said out loud to the empty front of the bus, "She's going to ask you tomorrow, and you should say yes." I don't know who I was talking to. I don't know what she was going to ask. I don't know who you was going to ask. I don't know who you was. I was alone in the front of a bus, and the 2 passengers were asleep. I looked at the clock, 2047. I put in my transfer request the next day. I never worked another overnight. But here's the coda, the part that I've only told to one person before you. About a month after I left the overnight shift, I was at home, lying in bed, awake, couldn't sleep, adjusting to the new schedule. I looked at my phone, 2:47 a.m., and I heard myself say, whisper, really, just barely out loud, "The driver who replaced you doesn't listen." And I didn't know what it meant then. And I don't know what it means now, but I know what it felt like. It felt like a system losing its outlet. It felt like something that had been using the bus, using the time, using the passengers and the dark and the empty streets to transmit, and I'd been the antenna. And now the antenna was gone, and the signal was still looking for somewhere to go, and the signal was still looking for somewhere to go, and it had followed me home. It stopped after that, one time at home, and then nothing. But I will tell you that the driver who took over my overnight shift, Eddie Vasquez, good guy, 10 years experience, quit after 5 months. No notice, just stopped showing up. I ran into him at a gas station a year later, and he looked like he hadn't slept in that entire year. I asked him what happened. He said, "The bus talks, Ray." I said, "I know." He shook his head. "No." He shook his head. "No," he said. "The bus talks. Not the people, the bus." I didn't ask him to explain. Some doors you don't open. I learned that from story 1. I'm learning it too late, but I'm learning it. Story 4, the regular. Every driver has regulars, people you see so often that they become part of the route, like landmarks. You notice if the guy who always gets on at Oak Street with his thermos wasn't there one morning, the same way you'd notice if the Oak Street sign was missing. Regulars are structural. They hold the route together. I had a lot of regulars over 23 years, but I want to talk about one specific one. His name, the name he gave me was Gil. Just Gil. We never exchanged last names. Gil rode my bus every weekday for 11 years. Let me say that again because the number matters, 11 years. I transferred to the 22 route in 2008 and Gil was already on it. He got on at Prospect and 8th every morning at 7:40 and got off at the courthouse downtown. He got back on at 15 and rode to Prospect and 8th and got off 5 days a week for 11 years. He was a thin man, average height, maybe late 40s when I started the route. Wore button-down shirts, khakis, the kind of clothes that say office job without specifying which office. He carried a leather briefcase that was nice but not expensive, and he had a wedding ring, and he always sat in the same seat. 3rd row, left side, aisle. For the first year, we just nodded. Good morning. He'd show his pass. I'd nod. That was our relationship. 2nd year, he started saying small things. Weather observations. Cold one. Think it'll rain. I'd respond in kind. Drivers have a whole register for this. Short, polite, non-committal. The vocal equivalent of a nod. 3rd year, he asked my name. I told him. He told me his. After that, it was Morning Ray and Morning Gil, and that was our upgrade. We'd been promoted from nodding to names. Year 5, he started occasionally making slightly longer comments, not conversations, observations. New detour on 5th, watch out. Or, your left brake light's out and noticed yesterday. Useful stuff. He was watching the bus. He was paying attention to things that helped me. I liked Gil, you understand? Over 5 years of daily contact with no single meaningful interaction, I had developed genuine affection for this person. That's what repetition does. That's what regulars are. They're people you love in small, undramatic increments. And you never tell them, and they probably feel the same way. And the whole thing exists in the 6 feet between the third row and the driver's seat, and it never goes anywhere, and it never has to. You're 7. Gil was late one morning. First time in 7 years. I actually waited an extra 30 seconds at Prospect and 8th, which I'm not supposed to do and which I'd never done for anyone. He didn't come. I drove on. I was unsettled for the whole run, physically uncomfortable like I'd skipped a step going downstairs. He was back the next day. Morning Ray. Morning Gil. Nothing about the absence. I didn't ask. Year 9. He missed 2 days in a row. When he came back, he lost weight. Noticeable weight. His shirt collar was loose. He didn't say anything. I didn't ask. Drivers don't ask. Year 10. He was there every day, but he was different. Slower getting on. He started using the handrail, which he'd never done. His briefcase looked heavier, or he looked weaker. One morning, he sat down and exhaled in a way that had a sound in it, a thin whistling sound, and I recognized it because my father made that sound for the last year of his life. It's the sound of lungs that are working too hard. I didn't ask. I should have asked. I know that. You don't need to tell me. I know. Year 11. April. He got on the bus on a Monday morning and he looked at me and he said, "Ray, I want to apologize in advance." For what? "I'm gonna have to stop riding." He said it the way you'd say you were canceling a subscription. Polite. Almost administrative. But his eyes were wet. "You moving?" I said. "Something like that." He rode to the courthouse. He got off. He said, "Thank you, Ray," instead of the usual nod. And I said, "You take care, Gil." And the doors closed. He didn't ride back that evening. I wasn't surprised. He didn't ride the next morning, or the next, or the next. A month went by. I kept glancing at Prospect and 8 every morning. The stop felt wrong without him. Structurally wrong. Like a missing tooth. In June, I saw a woman I didn't recognize standing at Prospect and 8th. She had a black dress on, and she was holding a piece of paper, and she was clearly waiting for my bus, but she wasn't waiting to ride it. She was waiting for it to stop so she could talk to the driver. I opened the doors. "Are you Ray?" she said. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Gil's wife. Karen. I want to be careful here because this is someone else's grief, and I'm not going to perform it for a story. I'll be brief. Gil had pancreatic cancer. He'd been diagnosed 3 years before he stopped riding. 3 years. He'd done treatment. He'd lost weight. He'd gotten weaker. He kept riding my bus every day through all of it because, and this is what Karen told me, standing on the curb at 7:42 a.m. with a folded piece of paper in her hand, because the bus ride was the last normal thing in his life, and I was the last normal person, and he wanted to keep it as long as he could. He died in May, 3 weeks before Karen found me. She gave me the piece of paper. It was a note. Gil had written it. It said, "Ray, thank you for never asking. You have no idea what that was worth." Gil. And I stood there in the driver's seat of my bus, with a route to run and a schedule to keep and 6 passengers waiting behind this woman, and I read that note, and I cried. I'm going to say this once, and then I'm going to keep going. I have carried 2 contradictions for the rest of my life, and I will carry them until I die. The first, a woman who needed me to ask, and I didn't, and the not asking might have cost something I can't measure. The second, a man who needed me to not ask, and I didn't. And the not asking was the greatest gift I ever accidentally gave. The same silence, the same habit, the same rule. And it was both the worst thing and the best thing I ever did. And they happened on the same bus, on routes that overlapped by 11 stops. And I could not have done one differently without destroying the other because I didn't know which one I was in while I was in it. That's what 23 years of driving a bus does to you. You learn that the right thing and the wrong thing are the same thing. And you won't know which one you did until it's too late to change it. Now, I've told you 2 stories that aren't really scary, and you're probably wondering when the scary part starts. It's starting. I told you these first because you need to understand what a regular is, and what silence is, and what happens to a person who sits in the same seat for 23 years watching the world board and exit, and board an exit, you need to understand the chair, because the chair is where the rest of these happened. Story 5. The last row. This one I've never told anybody. Not my ex-wife, not Gary Puckett, not the union rep. Nobody. I'm telling you because you asked, and because you're my daughter, and because if I don't tell someone, I think it's going to eat a hole in me, and I'm 61 and I've got enough holes. In 2015, I was on the 22, the same route I took over in 2008, the one Gill Road. By this point, I'd been on it 7 years, and I knew every bump in the pavement, every traffic light cycle, every shadow that the trees on Birch Avenue threw on the bus at 4:30 p.m. in October. The 22 was a long bus, 40 foot, 12 rows of seats plus the back bench, which was the long seat that stretched across the full width at the very back. The back bench was its own world. I couldn't see it in the mirror. The interior mirror shows maybe the first 8 rows clearly, and the rest gets compressed and dark. The back bench was a dead zone. I knew people were sitting there by weight. The bus feels different when the back is loaded. But I couldn't see faces. I couldn't see details. Drivers are told not to worry about the back bench. You can't monitor it. You can't police it. You close the doors, you drive, and whatever happens back there is between the passengers and God and the security cameras, which on my bus were broken more often than they worked. In October 2015, I started noticing that the bus was heavier at the end of my outbound run than the passenger count justified. This is a thing I could feel. After 7 years on the same bus, same physical vehicle, because I'd requested a permanent assignment and gotten it, I could feel the difference between 30 passengers and 32 passengers. It's a suspension thing. It's how the bus sits at a red light, how it accelerates from a stop, how the air brakes respond. I knew my bus the way you'd know your own body. And the bus was heavy. Not by a lot. By the weight of maybe one person. One extra person-sized weight that was there when it shouldn't have been. I started counting heads at the terminus. I'd park, open the doors, and watch everyone get off, counting. Then I'd compare to the fare box log. And every single time I checked, the numbers matched. The head count matched the fares. Nobody extra. But the bus was heavy. I chalked it up to mechanical stuff. Suspension wearing out maybe. Fluid buildup somewhere. I put in a maintenance request. They checked the bus. Nothing wrong. Suspension was fine. Weight was within spec. So I started paying attention to when the heaviness happened. It was the outbound runs. Always outbound. And it started around mid-route. Around the time the bus passed through the stretch on Markin Boulevard, where the streetlights were spaced too far apart, and there was a half-mile of darkness between the taqueria and the self-storage place. After Larkin, the bus was heavy. Before Larkin, it wasn't. Something was getting on the bus on Markin Boulevard. There were no stops on that half-mile stretch. No one pulled the cord. The doors didn't open. But after that stretch, there was more weight on the bus. One evening in November, I did something I'd never done in my career. At the end of the outbound run, after all the passengers exited, I didn't pull away from the terminus. I turned off the engine, I turned off the interior lights, and I walked to the back of the bus. The back bench was empty. Visually, physically empty. No one was sitting there. No bags, no belongings, nothing. I sat down on the back bench. It was warm. Not the kind of warm a bench gets from a person sitting on it. This was different. The warmth was even across the entire bench, all the way across, as if something very large had been sitting there, or lying there, spread across the full width. And when I sat down, I felt the bus shift. The suspension settled. Very slightly, like a sigh. What the bus was adjusting to a new distribution of weight, but the new distribution should have been just me. 61-inch, 210-pound me, sitting in one spot. The suspension shouldn't have settled that much. It settled the way it settles when the back bench is full. 5, 6 people worth of settling. I was not alone on that bench. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't hear anything. The bus was dark and quiet, and I was sitting on a warm bench in the back, and the suspension said there was someone else, and my eyes said there wasn't. I want to tell you I did something brave. I want to tell you I spoke, or reached out, or investigated. I didn't. I got up. I walked to the front. I started the bus. I drove it back to the depot. I parked. I went home. And I told myself it was mechanical. Suspension. Heat retention in the vinyl. Confirmation bias. all the rational things, and I almost believed them. But the next evening, outbound run, I passed through the dark stretch on Larkin, and the bus got heavy, and when I glanced in the mirror that can't clearly show the backbench, I saw the shadows back there shift. Not a person-shaped shift, not a movement, a rearrangement, like the darkness itself changed its posture. This went on for 2 years. I want you to sit with that number. 2 years, not 2 nights, not 2 weeks. 2 years of driving a bus that was carrying something I couldn't see. Every outbound run in the back bench past Larkin Boulevard, I developed a routine. I drove. I passed through the dark stretch. I felt the bus get heavy. I didn't look at the mirror. I didn't go to the back. I drove the route. I let the passengers off, and I returned to the depot, and I never sat on the back bench again. And whatever was there, it didn't do anything. It never touched anyone. It never made a sound. No passenger ever complained. No one ever came to the front and said, "There's something wrong in the back." It just rode. Every outbound run it got on in the dark stretch, and at the end of the route it got off. Or it stopped being there, or it was absorbed back into whatever it came from. It was regular. And that's what scared me. Not its presence. Its consistency. It behaved exactly like every other regular I'd ever had. It had a stop. It had a seat. It had a routine. It boarded, and it exited, and it didn't cause problems. It was the most well-behaved passenger on my bus. The only difference was that it wasn't visible and it shouldn't have existed. In 2017, I was reassigned to a different physical bus. Budget thing, they were rotating the fleet. I got a newer model with working cameras and LED interior lights that didn't have dark zones. The back was fully lit. First outbound run. Larkin Boulevard. Dark stretch. The bus didn't get heavy. Second run, nothing. Third run, nothing. A week, nothing. A month, nothing. It was gone, or it was specific to the old bus, or it was specific to the dark. 6 months later, I saw my old bus, the one I'd driven for 9 years, parked in the maintenance yard with an out-of-service sign on it. I asked the fleet manager what happened. "Suspension's shot," he said. "Back axle's carrying weight that isn't there. Can't figure it out. Easier to retire it." I didn't say anything. What was I going to say? But I went to the yard that weekend, early Sunday. Nobody around. I walked to my old bus. The doors were unlocked because it was out of service, and nobody cared. I walked to the back bench. It was warm. 2 years after I'd stopped driving it. Parked, engine off, out of service, sitting in a maintenance yard in November. And the back bench was warm evenly across its entire width. And the bus, I could feel this, because I knew this bus. I'd sat in its seat for 9 years, and I knew its body the way I know my own hands. The bus was heavy, full weight heavy. Not one person, not 6 people, full, standing room only, packed to capacity, on a bus that was empty, with no engine, in a yard, in the cold. Whatever was riding my bus hadn't stopped when I left. It had continued. It had been boarding every day, running its route, sitting in its seat, even without a driver, even without a route, even without movement. It was riding a parked bus in an empty lot because the routine was the thing, not the destination. And I stood there in the aisle of my dead bus, and I thought about all the nights it rode behind me, warm and heavy and silent and consistent, and I realized I missed it. Not the fear, not the strangeness, the regularity, the weight of it, the feeling that someone was there in the back riding along. I went to the yard one more time a month later. The bus was gone. Scrapped. I asked where, and they said a recycling place in West Virginia. I wonder if the metal is heavy. Story 6. The Children. I'm going to preface this by saying I have no evidence for what I'm about to tell you. No dates, no documentation, no names I can verify. This one lives entirely in my memory, and I know enough about memory now to know that's not the same thing as it living in reality. So take this one with that caveat. Between 2009 and 2014, I drove past a school 4 times a day. I own a Roosevelt Elementary on my inbound and outbound runs on both the morning and afternoon shifts. The school was on Kenmore Avenue between 2 stops, so I never stopped directly in front of it, but I passed it close enough to see the playground, the front entrance, the crossing guard, the parents in their cars, and close enough to see the children. I liked passing the school. It was a good part of the route. In the morning, you'd see the kids arriving, backpacks too big for their bodies, some of them running, some of them dragging, the whole spectrum of how children feel about education on any given morning. In the afternoon, you'd see them leaving. Louder, faster, free. It was, I'm going to use a word I don't use a lot, it was wholesome. In a job that runs on routine and fatigue, the school was a little burst of life 4 times a day. In 2012, I started noticing that the children on the playground at afternoon recess were playing a game I didn't recognize. Now, kids play weird games. I know that. They make up rules, they change them, they play games that look like chaos because they are chaos. I'm not saying it was strange to see children playing something I couldn't identify. What I'm saying is that over a period of 6 months, I watched them play this game. Always the same group, maybe 12 kids, always in the same corner of the playground near the fence closest to the street, and the game had rules I could observe from the bus, and the rules didn't change, and the rules don't correspond to anything I've ever seen children do. Here's what the game looked like from the bus, at passing speed, through my side window and mirror. The children stood in a circle, not holding hands, just standing. One child was in the center. The child in the center stood still with their arms at their sides and their eyes closed. The children in the circle watched the center child. No one moved. No one spoke. Or at least their mouths weren't moving. Then, and this happened fast, so I'm reconstructing from multiple days of observation, the center child would point. Eyes still closed. They'd raise one arm and point at a specific child in the circle. And that child would walk to the center, and the first child would walk to the circle, and they'd swap places, and it would start again. That's it. That's the whole game, standing in a circle, waiting, pointing, swapping. Except the child who got pointed at always, and I mean always. Every time I saw this, the child who got pointed at had a reaction. Not a game reaction. Not a game reaction. Or all, man. A real reaction. Some of them went pale. Some of them shook their heads before walking to the center, like they were trying to refuse. Some of them looked at the other children as they walked in, like they were looking for help. And the child who left the center, the one who done the pointing, always looked relieved. Shoulders down, breathing out, relaxed, like they'd been holding something and they'd given it away. One afternoon in November 2012, I was stopped at the light on Kenmore, directly alongside the playground fence. Longest red light in the city, 90 seconds. I could see clearly. The game was happening. The center child, a boy, maybe 9, red jacket, had his eyes closed. The circle was tight, maybe 10 kids. The center child raised his arm and pointed. He was pointing at the bus, not at a child, at me. Through the fence, across the sidewalk, at the bus, at my window. His eyes were closed and his arm was extended and his finger was aimed directly at the driver's seat of a city bus that happened to be stopped at a red light. The children in the circle all turned to look at the bus. At me. 10 faces, none of them older than 10, all looking at me with the expression of the chosen child. The reluctant walk, the plea for help, the not me, please not me face. I looked at them. They looked at me. The boy's arm is still extended. The light changed. I drove away. And I want to tell you that was the end of it. But the next afternoon, I passed the school and the children were playing the game. And the center child, different day, was already pointing at the street. Not at a specific child in the circle, at the street. At whatever was passing. And the day after that, I didn't see the game. And the day after that, I didn't see it. And I didn't see it again for 3 weeks. And then it was back, same corner, same circle, and this time there was no child in the center. The center of the circle was empty, and the children were all looking at the empty center and waiting. I stopped watching. Same reason I stopped counting stops in story 2. The same Gary Puckett logic, don't count, don't look. Don't participate. You're a driver. Drive. But this one stays with me differently than the others. It stays with me because of the children's faces. Because they weren't playing, they were performing an obligation. And whatever they were transferring from one to the next was heavy enough to cause relief in the person who gave it away and dread in the person who received it. And on one afternoon, the game tried to give it to me. And the red light changed, and I drove away. And I don't know what would have happened if it hadn't changed. If I'd sat there for another 10 seconds, another 30, another minute, if the boy's arm had stayed up and the children had kept looking and the light had stayed red, I don't know what I would have agreed to receive. Story 7. The conversation I wasn't part of. I was back on days by then, doing the 22 again. Afternoon run, probably 3:30 p.m. Bus was moderately full, maybe 20 passengers. Mix of commuters, students, a couple of older people with shopping bags. 2 women I didn't know were sitting in the middle of the bus across the aisle from each other. Both middle-aged, both dressed normally. They weren't together. They boarded at different stops and hadn't acknowledged each other. At some point they started talking. I don't usually listen to passenger conversations. You can't. The engine noise, the road noise, the stop announcements, they all blend into a wall of sound that makes individual conversations hard to pick out unless someone's shouting. But these 2 women were talking at a volume that cut through. Not loud, clear. The kind of clear that comes from enunciation, not volume. Every word was distinct. I started catching fragments. Said it would be the 3rd house, but I counted 4. You're counting from the wrong end. Start from the one with the blue door. I didn't see a blue door. It's not blue during the day. This is where I started paying attention. A door that's not blue during the day. What does that mean? A door that changes color? A door that's only blue at night? The conversation continued, and I'm going to try to reproduce as much of it as I can. I don't have a recording. I don't have notes from that day. This is from memory, and I know memory is unreliable, and you should apply whatever discount you think is appropriate to everything I'm about to say. When did you start going there? After my mother's house was sold. There wasn't anywhere else. They told me it was by invitation. It is. But the invitation doesn't look like an invitation. It looks like a water bill. Mine was a jury summons. That's new. They used to only do utility bills. How long ago? March. This March? Then you're recent. Have you been inside yet? Twice? What floor? I didn't know there were floors. Long pause. When you went in, did you go down? I went through the front door and it was a hallway. I walked to the end. There was a room. How big was the room? Normal. Like a living room. Chairs, a table. The wallpaper was old. Did anyone else come in? A man. He gave me an envelope. What was in the envelope? A photograph. Of me. In my kitchen. From above. Pause. When was the photograph taken? I don't know. I was wearing clothes I own. I was making coffee. It could have been any morning. Was the kitchen right? What do you mean? Was the kitchen in the photograph your kitchen? Exactly. I think so. Check the window. In the photograph. Check what's outside the window. I didn't bring the photograph. I left it there. Good. That's the right thing to do. Don't take anything out. I was gripping the steering wheel. I was trying not to turn around. I was trying to be a driver. What happens if you take something out? They know, because the thing you took out isn't really out. It's still there, and it's also with you, and they can see where it is because it's still in the room. The room isn't really a room. No. What is it? And here the woman who'd been answering, the one who seemed to know more, the one who'd been going longer, said something that I heard perfectly, every syllable, because a bus went by in the opposite direction at that exact moment, and its engine noise created a pocket of relative silence on my bus, the way 2 waves can cancel each other out, and in that 1-second pocket of quiet, she said, "It's a mouth." The room is a mouth. The hallway is a throat. And the house is whatever the throat is connected to. And when you sit in the chairs and put your hands on the table, you're sitting on the tongue, and it's tasting you. The bus noise came back. The 2 women kept talking, but I couldn't hear them clearly anymore. Fragments. Don't go on Tuesdays. The man with the envelope is not always a man. If the wallpaper changes, leave immediately. Do not finish the... One of them pulled the cord. The woman who knew less, the recent one, stood up and walked to the exit. As she passed the other woman, she paused. They didn't look at each other. The recent woman said quietly, "Is it going to hurt?" And the other woman said, "It already does. You just haven't found where yet." The recent woman got off. 2 stops later, the other woman got off. As she walked past my seat, she looked at me, directly at me. She smiled, not a threatening smile, a tired one, the kind of smile you give someone when you've both been in the same waiting room for too long. "You hear a lot, don't you?" she said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am," I said. "I just drive." That's good, she said. Keep driving. She stepped off the bus. I closed the doors. I drove. I don't know what any of that was about. I don't know if it was real. I mean, the conversation was real. It happened, but I don't know if the things they were describing were real. Could have been mental illness. Could have been a shared delusion. Could have been two people role-playing something I didn't understand. But the woman who got off last looked at me the way Gil's wife looked at me the morning she brought the note. She looked at me like I was a person she'd known about for a long time, but had never expected to see. And I think about the house with the blue door that's not blue during the day, and the room that's a mouth, and the photograph taken from above, and I think about how many of my passengers over 23 years were going to, or coming from places I couldn't see, living lives that operated on rules I didn't know existed, and my bus was just a connecting hallway between worlds I'm not supposed to know about. And maybe the best thing I ever did was keep driving. Story out, the reflection short one, but it's the one I think about when I'm trying to sleep. November. I was at a red light at the intersection of Main and Church, which has a large plate glass window on the corner. It used to be a bank, now it's a cell phone store, and at certain times of day, with certain light, that window acts like a mirror. You can see the bus reflected in it. I was stopped at the light. I looked at the window. I saw my bus reflected in the glass, and I counted the heads. I could see in the reflection the passengers in my bus. Silhouettes mostly. The light behind them made them dark shapes, but I could count them. I had 12 passengers on the bus. I knew this because I'd just done a mental count at the last stop. 12 people. The reflection showed 14. 2 extra silhouettes, one in the middle of the bus, aisle side, where nobody was sitting. I knew nobody was sitting there because that row had a broken seat with an out-of-order sign taped to it. One at the back, in the back bench area. I looked away from the window. I looked in my interior mirror. 12 passengers. Empty broken row. Empty back bench. I looked back at the window. 14. The 2 extras weren't moving. They were sitting the way the regular passengers were sitting. Upright, still, facing forward. They had the same posture. They were indistinguishable from the real passengers in every way, except that they existed only in their reflection. The light changed. I drove. The reflection slid away. I found another reflective surface, a parked truck with a chrome panel. 3 blocks later. I was going too fast to count, but I thought I saw the wrong number. I thought I saw too many heads. I started looking for reflections. Every reflective surface I passed, windows, chrome, wet pavement after rain, the dark glass of office buildings. I checked the count, and it was never 12. It was always more. 14, 15. Once, on a bus with 20 passengers, the reflection in a puddle at a stoplight showed what looked like 30. And here's the thing that keeps me up. It wasn't always more. Sometimes, on a full bus, the reflection count was right. 40 passengers, 40 reflections. No extras. The extras only appeared when the bus was below half full. When there was room, when there were empty seats, the reflections filled them. I don't know what rides the bus in the reflection. I don't know if it's the same thing from Story 5, the heavy warm thing on the back bench, seen from a different angle. I don't know if the reflection is more accurate than what I see through the mirror. I don't know if I'm the one seeing wrong and the reflection is seeing right. I know that for the last 4 years of my career, I avoided reflective surfaces. I stopped looking at plate glass windows. I stopped checking chrome. When it rained, I kept my eyes on the road, because the last time I looked, the very last time, in 2022, a few months before I retired, the reflection showed a full bus, standing room only, every seat taken, people in the aisle, packed, and I had 4 passengers, and one of the extra silhouettes, one of the reflection people, was standing at the front of the bus, in the driver's area, next to my seat, and it was looking at me, not forward, not at the road, at me, turned toward the driver's seat, facing me, the way no passenger ever stands because there's a yellow line on the floor that says, "Stand behind this line." It was behind the line in reality. It was behind the line in the reality. It was past the line in the reflection. I stopped looking. Story 9. The road that wasn't mine pandemic year. I know, everybody has pandemic stories. This isn't a pandemic story, the pandemic is just the setting. During lockdown, the transit authority cut service to about 30%. Most routes suspended. They kept the essentials, hospital routes, grocery store routes. the lines that served neighborhoods without cars. Everything else shut down. I was one of the senior drivers, so I kept working. They put me on the 5, which I'd never driven. The 5 ran from the east side through downtown to the west side medical center. Straight shot, no loops, no deviations. In normal times, it was a packed route. During lockdown, it was a ghost. 5, 6 passengers per run. Everyone in masks. Nobody talking. The city was empty. I don't mean quiet. I mean empty. You could drive for blocks without seeing a person, a car, a sign of life. The traffic lights still cycled for nobody. The crosswalk signs still counted down for no one. The infrastructure was performing its function for an audience that had disappeared. I mention this because it matters for what happened. In April 2020, I was doing a mid-afternoon run on the 5th. 3 passengers, all in masks, all seated far apart. The bus was silent except for the engine and the automated announcements. I was on Delaney Street, which is a stretch I didn't know well because I'd never driven the 5 before. And I came to a stop, the Delaney and Poplar stop, and the automated voice said, "Next stop, Delaney and Poplar," and I pulled over and opened the doors. Nobody got off. Nobody got on. I closed the doors and pulled away. The automated voice said, "Next stop, Hargrove Terminal." I didn't know where Hargrove Terminal was. I looked at my route sheet. The stop after Delaney and Poplar was Delaney and Vine, not Hargrove Terminal. There was no Hargrove Terminal on the 5. I'd never heard of Hargrove Terminal on any route. I kept driving. I followed the route on my sheet, turned on Vine, headed toward downtown. Normal roads, normal intersections. But the automated voice didn't announce Delaney and Vine. It had skipped it. And it didn't announce the next stop either. The system was silent. And then, about 6 blocks later, it spoke again. Now arriving, Hargrove Terminal. I was in the middle of Delaney Street. There was no terminal. There was a boarded-up dry cleaner, a parking lot, and a fire hydrant. No bus stop, no sign, no shelter. I didn't stop. I kept driving. The voice said nothing else for the rest of the run. At the West Side Medical Center, the system reset and worked normally for the return trip. The next day, same thing. Mid-afternoon outbound on the 5. After Delaney and Poplar, the voice announced Hargrove Terminal. The streets were the same streets. The route was the same route. But the system thought there was a terminal that didn't exist. I reported it to dispatch. They said they'd check the announcement software. They called me back the next day and said there was no error in the system. The 5 route had no stop called Hargrove Terminal. The recordings didn't include that name. It wasn't in the database. But I heard it every afternoon run for 3 months. In June, I decided to stop at the spot where the voice said now arriving. The boarded-up dry cleaner. The parking lot. The fire hydrant. I pulled over. I opened the doors. The 3 passengers on the bus looked up, confused. There was no stop here, no sign, no reason to stop. No one got on. No one got off. But the fare box chimed. 1 fare. Exact change. Coins dropping into an empty machine with no one standing in front of it. And then, from the back of the bus, the back bench, a voice I didn't recognize said, "Thank you, driver." I checked the mirror. 3 passengers, all in the front half of the bus, all in masks, all staring at me, no one in the back. I closed the doors, I drove. The automated voice said, "Next stop, Delaney and Vine." I didn't stop at the dry cleaner again, but the voice kept announcing Hargrove Terminal every afternoon for 3 more months, until August, when the route was updated and the 5 was extended to cover a new stop near the hospital parking structure. After the update, the Hargrove announcement stopped. In September 2020, when the extended route started, I drove the new section for the first time. The new stop near the hospital parking structure had a shelter, a bench, and a sign. The sign said, "Hargrove Terminal." I nearly drove off the road. I called dispatch. The new stop on the 5 extension, Hargrove Terminal. When was that name chosen? Let me check. Keyboard typing. Named after Councilwoman Diane Hargrove. She pushed for the extension. Name was finalized in July. The stop was named in July 2020. My bus had been announcing it since April. The automated system had been announcing a stop that wouldn't exist for 3 months. It had been announcing it at the wrong location, 6 blocks away from where it would eventually be built. And something had been boarding there, paying fare, and riding to the back of the bus. something that knew the future name of a stop that hadn't been named yet, something that had been waiting for its stop to exist. I drive past Hargrove Terminal now. Well, I did until I retired, and it's a normal stop. People wait there. People board. People get off. There's a bench and a shelter and a trash can. It's real. It's concrete and metal and paint. But for 3 months in 2020, something rode my bus from where Hargrove Terminal would eventually be, and it paid its fare, and it sat in the back, and it waited. And I wonder how many of the stops I've driven past for 23 years started that way. How many of them were invisible first? How many of them were used before they were built by passengers who weren't passengers yet, on routes that hadn't been drawn? The city we see is the finished version. The bus moves through a draft. Story 10, The Last Ridge. This is the last one. I saved it for last, not because it's the scariest, but because it's the one that's still happening. My last day driving was December 15, 2023. 23 years, 2 months, and 6 days. I put in my retirement papers in October. I'd done the goodbye rounds, the dispatcher gifts, the driver's lounge cake, the card everyone signed, all the rituals. I was ready. My last run was the 22. They let me choose, and I chose the 22 because it was Gil's route, and it was the route I'd driven the longest, and it felt right. December 15th. Friday. I did the morning outbound at 6:20. Cold, dark, the windows fogged from inside. Maybe 15 passengers. Normal run. I hit every stop, I made every turn, I felt the route in my body the way I'd felt it for 15 years. Bump on Prospect where the water main was replaced. Long lighted Birch and Fourth. The lean the bus takes on the curve past the library. Inbound I had an almost empty bus. 3 passengers. They got off before downtown. For the last 7 stops, it was just me. I did the afternoon outbound, then the afternoon inbound. Each time, the bus got emptier near the end, as if the route was shedding its passengers early, clearing the way. My final run was the 15 p.m. inbound, the going home run. Full bus at the start, thinning as we went. By the time I hit Kenmore Avenue, the school, Eleanor Roosevelt, where the children played the game, it was dark, and the schools closed, and the playground was empty, and I had 8 passengers. By Larkin Boulevard, the dark stretch where the heavy thing used to board, I had 4. By downtown, I had 1. A woman I didn't recognize, sitting near the middle, reading a paperback. She got off at the transit center. "Have a good night," she said. Standard. Nothing special. She didn't know it was my last ride. Why would she? I was alone. I was supposed to pull into the depot and park the bus and hand in my keys and walk away. That's the procedure. That's how it ends. Instead, I drove past the depot. I don't know why. I don't have a justification. I drove past the depot entrance and I kept going. I wasn't joyriding. I wasn't being sentimental. I wasn't ready. The route wasn't done. In my body, in the part of me that had memorized 47 stops, or 48, or 52, or whatever the real number was, the route wasn't done. There was more. I drove the 22 outbound again. Empty bus. No passengers. No fare collection. No stop announcements. I had turned the system off. Just me and the bus, and the route. And the bus got heavy. Not on Larkin Boulevard. Not at any specific point. It got heavy gradually, evenly, the way a bathtub fills. The suspension compressed incrementally, stop by stop, as if passengers were boarding at every stop, filling every seat, packing the aisle, loading the back bench. But no one was there. I checked the mirror. Empty bus. I checked the road. No one at the stops. I checked the reflective surfaces. I couldn't help it. I looked at the plate glass window at Main and Church, the old bank, the cell phone store. Then I saw my bus reflected in the glass. Full. The reflection showed a packed bus. Every seat taken, people standing, the back bench loaded, the aisle crowded, faces I couldn't make out. Too dark, too compressed, too much reflection. But bodies, weight, presence. My bus, my last ride. And they were all riding with me. I drove the full outbound route. Hospital turnaround. I stopped. I opened the doors. The bus got lighter. Not all at once, incrementally. Like a crowd dispersing, the suspension rose, slowly, settling back to empty. It took about 2 minutes. 2 minutes of invisible passengers exiting a bus at the end of the line. And then it was empty. Really empty. The kind of empty a bus never is. Because even when there are no passengers, a bus carries its own weight. The seats, the fare box, the engine, the frame. This was emptier than that. This was a bus that had been carrying something for a very long time, and the something had finally left, and the bus was lighter than it should have been, because it had been heavy for so long that heavy was its baseline, and now it was back to what it would have weighed if it had never carried anything at all. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. Then I closed the doors, drove back to the depot, parked, and handed in my keys. Tom Reyes, the night dispatcher, said, "How's it feel?" I said, "Light." He laughed. He thought I meant the workload. I let him think that. That's the ton. That's what I've got. That's what 23 years of driving a bus in one city gave me. And I said at the beginning that I wanted you to tell me if these are normal. If these are just things that happen when you do a job for too long. If this is pattern recognition gone haywire, or loneliness, or the kind of sensory breakdown you get from sitting in a vibrating chair for 8 hours a day for 2 decades. You can tell me that. It's okay. I'll believe you. I want to believe you. I want these to be fatigue and confirmation bias and aging and bad suspension and weird acoustics and kids playing games and people talking crazy on buses because that's what people do on buses. But since I retired, since December, I've been home. I've been cooking, I've been fixing the gutters, I've been doing the things retired people do. Normal life. No bus. No route. No passengers. And every night at 2:47 a.m., I wake up. Not from a nightmare. Not from noise. I just wake up like an alarm I didn't set. And I lie in the dark and I feel my bed settle. The mattress compresses. Just slightly. The way a bus seat compresses when someone sits in it. The way a back bench warms when something lies across it. Something is sitting on the edge of my bed, where the weight is, where the warmth is, and it's there every night at 2:47 and it stays until I fall back asleep. And the thing that scares me, the thing that actually scares me, the reason I called you, the reason I needed to tell someone these 10 stories before I lost the thread, is that I'm not afraid of it. I should be. I know I should be. Something invisible is sitting on my bed in the middle of the night. That should terrify me. But it doesn't. It feels like a regular. It feels like someone who's been riding with me for a long time and doesn't know the route is over. It feels like the weight that my bus carried. The weight that filled the reflection. The weight that rode the back bench for years and years. It followed me home. The way the 2047 voice followed me home. The way the route follows me when I drive past a bus stop and my car and my hands go to 10 and 2. 23 years. I carried something and I didn't know it, and now I've stopped carrying it, and it didn't get the memo. It's still riding. It's still sitting in its seat. It's still running the route. And the route is me now. I'm not a bus anymore. I'm retired. I'm a person in a house with bad gutters and a pension and a daughter who's kind enough to listen to her old man's scary stories on a Thursday night. But something is riding me. Something has been riding me for years. And it's patient. And it's consistent. And it pays its fare. And it never causes problems. And I don't know how to tell it the route's been canceled. Or, and this is the thing I didn't want to say, the thing I've been circling for an hour, the thing that wakes me up at 2047 and keeps me in the bed instead of running. Or maybe I don't want to. Maybe the weight is the only thing that makes me feel like I still have a route. Like I'm still going somewhere. Like there's still someone riding along. You asked if these stories were scary. Here's my answer. The scariest thing about driving a bus for 23 years is that the bus drove me back. And it hasn't stopped. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you for listening. I mean that. You should probably go. It's late. But one thing, you asked me at the start whether these stories were normal, whether I should be worried. Don't answer that tonight. Think about it. Take a few days. And then, if you decide these are just stories, just a tired old man making patterns out of noise, that's fine. You can tell me and I'll believe you and we'll never talk about this again. But if you're on the bus tomorrow and you're riding to work, and you look at the driver, really look, not a glance, a real look, and the driver looks like someone who's carrying something they can't put down, don't ask, just ride. That's all any of us ever needed, someone to ride along.